Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hey everybody, this is Mark Scribner, your host, with my co-host John Warner on the Shrimp Tank. Today we have an amazing, iconic Boston personality that I feel like I spent my entire childhood, even though I'm a little bit younger than him, watching Mike Lynch and High Five Mike Lynch on Channel 5. I'd like to remind all our listeners this show is nationally syndicated through iHeart. You can find this podcast basically anywhere you can find your podcast: Google, Stitch, SoundCloud. We'd love to get your followership. Just smash that like button, the follow button, to get this show and upcoming shows. It would be amazing to get your followership, as I mentioned. With that said, I would like to bring on Mike Lynch, and again, has interviewed some of the most amazing sports personalities, heads of state. You see pictures and hanging out with the Bushes and Kenny Bunk and all over the place. But, you know, it's amazing to have you here, Mike, and thanks for coming on our show.
Hey, Mark and John, I'm thrilled to be on this show. I love the name of the show, Shrimp Tank. I mean, whoever, marketing genius right there, thumbs up. But I'm really flattered. Anytime somebody wants me on, I'm really thrilled. And I can't wait to, sometimes when you get, the older you get, the more you talk and the more stories you have. That's what my father used to tell me all the time. So feel free just to, cut me short if I ramble a little bit.
So, let's talk about, right now, you're spending a little less time on TV, but you're spending some time on Bloomberg. Let's talk about what you're doing right now.
Well, right now, I'm a special correspondent for Channel 5, WCVB in Boston, where I worked for about 39 years. COVID has really altered my appearances there because for a long time, there were no spectators, there were no media allowed at any of the events or any of the practices, and it's sort of come back that way now. So I was fortunate enough to be contacted by Bloomberg about almost 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years in April. And they have a podcast called the Bloomberg Business of Sports. And I have two co-hosts who are in New York, Michael Barr and Scarlett Fu. And I have a little Comrex unit, which I have in my house with a microphone. And so on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, we do a podcast. We'll have a guest on. For instance, this week we had Greg Sankey on, who was the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference. A big game coming up, national championship, Georgia and Alabama. But there's a lot of business involved there. New television contract with the Southeast Conference. They're getting Texas and Oklahoma in. And what does that do to the balance of power around the country? And what does it do for the economics of the, is the little conference is going to disappear along the way? So it's a different thinking for me. Instead of going into, a live shot at the Garden before a Celtics-Lakers playoff game and saying, okay, the Celtics in Game 5, their record is 21-6, and the three-point shots. I'm thinking differently now. I'm doing a lot of research, a lot of financial research, and it's great because it's invigorating for me. I think still have most of my brain pretty much intact, and I get to use it a little bit more in a different way than I did when I was doing a regular sportscast. It's a little bit of a challenge. I like it, but the Bloomberg people have been incredibly welcoming to me. I don't feel like a third wheel. They make me feel included, wanted, and valuable. And I really, really like it. I'm really enjoying it an awful lot.
Mike, I have a question. Boston's known as a sports town.
Yep.
You've probably been around the country as you followed some of the teams that you covered as our teams, went around. What makes Boston such a great sports town? Has it always been that way? And where is it heading? Are we going up? Are we going down? And what's unique about us compared to the other cities?
Well, I think we're since we're one of the oldest cities in the United States, a lot of people don't leave here; they stay here. So you've got everybody can tell their grandfather and grandmother told them stories about Ted Williams, and then they start to tell stories about John Havlicek and Bob Cousy and Bill Russell. And then they'll tell stories about Bobby Orr and Phil Esposito. So people stay here and it gets handed down. So you become a fan at a very young age. And the spectrum of people that watches Boston sports team runs from age 6 to probably 96. You go to a place like, Atlanta or Houston, the kind of transient towns, a lot of people from Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines moved down to Atlanta. A lot of people in the space program moved into Houston, Sacramento. They don't have the long and storied history that the Boston teams do. Success plays a big part in it. I mean, the Celtics were enormously successful starting in 1956. You know, from 1956 until 1986, they never went more than 5 years without winning an NBA championship. Now, they had that great run from 56 to 69. Then they came back and won in 74 and 76. Then they had a little bit of a drought. They came back and they won in 81, 84, and 86. And then after 86, it was a little bit of a dry spell till they won in 2008, I think it was. So I think it's a generational thing more than anything else. You're taught at a young age to dislike the Yankees. You're taught at a young age that the greatest hockey player who ever lived was Bobby Orr. You're taught that Ted Williams was the greatest hitter of all time, and you know, and you go on believing it, and you pass it on to your children and their children.
That's really good. Now, how hard is it to be a sportscaster? I mean, you have so many different things that you can feature, but you know, you're at the top of the food chain in terms of people want to go to you, all the athletes, you had the relationships that you built over the whole course of your career to be able to have these athletes trust you and open up to you and get the access. But how hard is it to do that in an environment like Boston?
Well, we were pretty lucky. When I started, there were only 3 stations. It was just before the advent of cable television, before ESPN, before NESN, before NBC Sports Network, before all the other national networks as well. So, and there were 9 jobs in Boston, 3 jobs at Channel 4, 3 jobs at Channel 5, 3 jobs at Channel 7. There were 9 of us. So pretty good chance that, you know, we were at pretty much every practice, every game, and you got to know a lot of these players a little bit better. When you went around, you know, someone's cubicle in their locker room, you know, there might be 2 writers and there might be 2 people with microphones. I mean, now it's 10 deep around. In fact, it's gotten so bad now they have to actually sit in an auditorium and do the press conference. So you really kind of missed that little connection. There's a great book I just read by Dan Shaughnessy. I wish it could have lasted forever. And the book basically is about the relationship that we all had with the Celtics going through the Larry Bird era. I mean, they all knew us by name. I went on a soap opera one time, All My Children, because I did a story on athletes. A lot of pro athletes were hooked on soap operas because they had nothing to do during the day when they were playing at 8 o'clock at night. So I went down and I was on All My Children. And then I went and I sat with Calvin Schiraldi, and who pitched in the '86 World Series for the Red Sox. And we watched All My Children together. We had a camera on and we had him mic'd up, and he's going, "Oh, no, please, I hope she's not going to die. She's in the emergency room right now. Oh, she's cheating on him. She's cheating on him. I hope Alex doesn't find out about it." It was hilarious. And then I went and talked to Dennis Johnson and a couple other Celtics players. They said, "Yeah, but I don't want anybody to know that I sit around and watch soap operas. People think that I'm, you know, doing sit-ups or push-ups all afternoon." But that was the action. That would never happen today. It would never happen today. There isn't an athlete in the world that lets you come and sit at their house. Jerry Remy's first year, after he retired, I asked if I could come over and watch the Red Sox game with him as a retired player. The Red Sox were playing in Detroit. Leadoff batter was Dwight Evans. And we had the camera on Jerry and had him mic'd up. First pitch, Evans hits it out of the park for a home run. And Jerry goes, "Holy bleep." I said, "Oh, geez, we can't use that on Channel 5. And so he did it over again for me. And but the relationship I had built up with him during his playing days enabled me to come over to his house and watch the game then. It's gone now. COVID is the way to go. I mean, COVID, Zoom is the way to go in a lot of interviews, like we're doing here. And a lot of the sound that you use on television now is spoon-fed by the teams. They set up the Zoom. Here's what we're having today. You know, we're going to have Jake DeBrusk and we're going to have Bruce Cassidy of the Bruins. Or we're going to have Bill Belichick and we're going to have Matthew Slater. Oh, geez, I want to talk to Mac Jones. No, sorry, he'll be available tomorrow.
So, Mike, does that the press, the handlers, is that kind of the norm now? The handlers kind of organize everything, so you just don't have that access. Okay.
You don't have the access. You know, you might have a story on something. I don't know. You know, Steve Nelson had a daughter born with Down syndrome, and you know, you can get to know Steve a little bit and talk about his efforts and what he's done, you know, for that particular charity. Never happened these days. Very, very rare if it happens. You used to fly on the team plane, stay in the team hotel. Never fly in the team plane anymore. Never stay in the team hotel anymore. Matter of fact, if they see you in the team hotel, they ask you to leave. I was in Atlanta. I was in the Patriots hotel only because it was the day that they were announcing the Hall of Fame winners. And Ty Law and Richard Seymour were two of the finalists. And there was this, they would come out of their room and walk through the lobby, and people would clap for them. So we were over there and we had a camera, and I got my phone rang, and it was Stacey James of the Patriots. He said, Mike, I need you to leave the lobby right now. I could have put up a fuss and said, you know, it's a free country, I can stay wherever I want, but I left. And so that they're very controlling, and it's very difficult to get access and get a good, juicy human interest story. Much more, not impossible, but much more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, I think of skiing and tennis, two sports that you wouldn't recognize 100 years ago because technology has changed so much. The next 25 years, which sports do you think are going to change because of technology or regulations in a way that they may be very different than they are today?
I think the ones that we use equipment like a tennis racket, like skis, golf clubs. I think a lot of the Olympic sports like luge, bobsled. You know, the athletes are always going to get bigger, stronger, and faster. But where's the limit here? Where's the limit on the human body? How strong they can be, how fast they can run, how fast they can throw a baseball. Is someone going to throw a baseball 115 miles an hour someday? I don't know. I don't think so. I think we've maxed out on some of the human performances. Analytics has changed a little bit on some of the success rates, but you know, you go back to look at the baseball. Without cheating, no one's going to break Babe Ruth's home run record of 60. The only guys that broke it are the guys that cheated. And you know, so I think that, you know, without without drug enhancing the enhancements, it's going to be impossible. I think that the technology of equipment in those sports will make those sports much more exciting than they are today.
What if any impact do you think stuff like, and maybe this comes back to the Axis. I'm actually the Arizona Cardinals photographer. I don't know if you knew that. So I was at the Fiesta Bowl and the Guaranteed Rate Bowl.
Really?
And I have a lot of so the players have become friends, but I don't ask them if they're going to be playing or hurt, because now there's this element of sports gambling where everything is. It seems like a lot of the sports are changing because now there's wagering and it's like everything's in a closed box. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, since sports gambling seems to be pretty prevalent right now, like the DraftKings of the world, et cetera.
It's amazing. You sit and watch a game and there's FanDuel. I mean, even Boomer Esiason and Phil Simms come on before the game. They do their FanDuel highs and lows of the week. I'm going to pick, you know, so-and-so is going to rush for so many yards. I take the over in this. So-and-so is going to throw so-and-so incompletions. I don't think it's going to affect professional athletes. What I really worry about is the college level. In fact, we talked to the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference yesterday, Greg Sankey, on our Bloomberg show. And I asked him about that. And he says, we restrict information that we release now that gambling is legal. We never put out an injury report. We never tell who was out sick and who missed practice, because that would affect gambling. We don't want some kid being at the free throw line, you know, when the score is like 61-60 and the over is 124 points, worrying about, oh my goodness, do I need to make this, you know, for the people that make the over and the under. And I worry about the temptation of the college athlete. I mean, we've seen it at Boston College. We saw it at NYU years ago. Professional athletes make too much money. They're not going to, there's nothing you can tempt them with. But a college athlete.
Other than Pete Rose.
yeah, exactly. What he must be thinking now about the whole Hall of Fame thing. I mean, this is, you know, this is going to come up again, you know, at the end of this month, we're going to find out who's in the Hall of Fame. And Pete Rose, he's going to be heard from again, you know, and so there are some people that might vote for him because of this.
What are some of your favorite sports moments that you think don't get celebrated, or there's some sports moments that get celebrated, but you have sort of a different take on them?
You know, someone asked me the other day, what was your favorite Patriots playoff game? And everyone expected me to say, well, when Adam Vinatieri kicked the field goal to win their first Super Bowl. And I said, my favorite moment was January, I don't know, let's call it January 15th, 1986. The Patriots beat the Dolphins in the Orange Bowl in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
Now, I went to the very first Patriots game in September of 1960 at BU's Nickerson Field, saw the Patriots play the Denver Broncos. I was 7 years old. I didn't quite understand. I thought it was a college team, for the first couple of weeks. But, I've lived through some pretty lean times with the Patriots. Yeah. and every time, honest, my brother was a fanatic, and my father, and I would watch Patriot games like this. Someone would return for the Patriots, would return a punt for a touchdown. Hey, in the end zone, we go, where's the flag? And we whip our heads back the other way because something could possibly go wrong. It almost always went wrong for the Patriots. So when I was down on the field with about 5 minutes to go, the Patriots had beaten the Dolphins in Miami, where they hadn't won since the late 1960s, almost 20 years. Every time they went down there, they found a way to lose. And they were going to the Super Bowl. And I turned to Jack Edwards, who I was working with at the time, and I said, I can't believe the Patriots are going to the friggin' Super Bowl. I might have used another word. I just sat there in disbelief because I honestly thought I would see a human land on Mars before the Patriots got to a Super Bowl. I just thought it was just such just an impossible destination and an impossible accomplishment for the Patriots. And that, to me, it was raining. The players were soaked. They were standing on the bench, and there were a whole bunch of Patriot fans behind the bench. And it was just a great, great moment. It's like they arrived. They finally had arrived. The Bruins had won a couple of cups. The Red Sox were in the World Series in 67 and 75. Celtics, of course, had banners hanging everywhere, but the Patriots had nothing. They had never even won a playoff game until that year. Imagine being in existence for 25 years and never winning a playoff game. Hard to believe.
Yeah. Mike, one of the, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that I always identified as a viewer watching you is you really always emphasized, you're obviously very technically proficient, the sport and articulate in that capacity. But with High Five, you always really, I think, put a lot of emphasis on the human interest side of that. Was that an angle that you conscientiously fell into, or like, how did that come about? Or, I mean, is that just you as your personality and as a person coming out, what was interesting to you? I was just curious because you seem to do an amazing job, getting underneath, unwrapping the onion, if you will, finding, things that are really like bonding. Like High Five was the bonding stories, or the adversarial, not adversarial, like some of these athletes that overcame things and their human interest stories of those you seem to highlight quite often.
I get a lot of credit for it. The credit goes to the coaches that make me aware of some of these stories. Some of the greatest human interest stories we've done were the direct result of a letter written to me by a coach or a phone call on my voice machine at Channel 5. I remember back in 1986, we started High Five in 1985, and we did it. It was the day of Hurricane Gloria. So you know how weather is. Weather just dominates, and something like the sports department might as well go home that day. But we had come up with something called High Five, featuring a high school player of the week. So it's a play on words. High for high school, 5 for Channel 5. In those days before the fist bump, High Five was the way people congratulate each other. Mm-hmm. So we ran a High Five on a kid named Joe Betro, whose dad was a police chief down in Walpole. And it was black and white film, and he had scored 4 touchdowns. And there was no human interest story there. It was just his Joe, an 86-yard run, his Joe. I didn't even interview him. We just ran the video because it was so hard to get film and then transfer it to tape and blah, 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 blah. I get back up to the sports office, and the phone's ringing off the hook. And they're saying, hey, we got a great player here in Framingham. What are you doing on the guy in Walpole for? Hey, we got a great player in Melrose. You want to see this? Hey, we got a great player down in Seekonk. I said, we're onto something here. People are liking it. And so we just continued doing it. And it just sort of took off. And the station always gave us the time. We used to run it on Fridays, so we figured out when Friday Night Football became so big that, no one's home watching it. So we started moving it to Thursday night. We ran it on Sunday nights. But the human interest stories, I remember there was a guy named Charlie O'Rourke, coach of Somerville High School. He says, Mike, you got to come see this girl, Lisa Wiswall. So she's a 3-sport runner, cross country, indoor and outdoor track, winter and spring. I go over there in the indoor track in Somerville, and she's running, and she has a wig on because she's been going through chemotherapy. And she, at the time, had 9 operations. She had bone cancer in her arm, and they would take bones out of her leg and put them in her tricep over here. And she was just amazing. And to this day, I still get a Christmas card from her every year. Her name is now Lisa Maciel, and she lives up in Tewksbury. She runs all the time. She's run like 12 Boston marathons. She barely has an arm left up here because they're still, taking parts of this out and parts of her leg out. But she is an amazing, amazing athlete. And then there was another young lady that played for Medfield High School. Coach Mike called me up and said, "You got to see this lady." And she was born without a left hand. Her arm stopped just between her elbow and her wrist. And she played field hockey. And she put the butt of the stick under her armpit, and her with her right arm, she hit the ball. She tried out as a freshman, got cut, tried out as a sophomore, she got cut, tried out as a junior, got cut, came back in the senior year. And she plays tennis. She puts a racket under her arm, throws the ball up with her right hand, grabs the racket. So I went down and talked to her, and she says, "I don't worry about things I can't do. I tell people things I can do." And I asked her where she was applying to college, and she was a great student. She rattled off Brown and Penn and Stanford and Northwestern. I said, "What about Harvard?" And she says, "Oh, I could never get in there." And I says, "Well, you'd be surprised." I said, "Send an application in." So at the end of that high five, that Thursday night, I looked in the camera. I said, "If there's any admissions directors from Harvard out there watching, take a good look at this application. You won't go wrong." March comes along. I get a call from a woman in the admissions office at Harvard. She says, "I was cooking dinner the night in November when we ran that story, and we are offering her admission tomorrow when the letters go out." I just started crying. I just started crying. And we've kept in touch. She was I can't even pronounce what she was doing, like a microbiologist. And she got an internship in Italy her freshman year. And now she runs this company all by herself in Boston. If that coach didn't pick up the phone and call me and have us come down there, who knows where she may have gone to college, where her life might have been. So to me, those are the gratifying things of those stories.
Oh, that'd be an awesome thing to do, like where are they now?
Yeah.
I know one of the clips that I was watching when you were going more part-time in terms of live TV, they were doing some catch-ups of interviewing people, like how that segment completely changed some of these kids' lives.
Yeah.
They're now.
Yeah.
But that might be a cool thing to kind of pull people back for a reunion type of special,
Yeah, it would be fun. We thought about that, but we said, how the heck do we find these people? It's easy to find somebody in a high school. You call Melrose High School. "Hey, I'm looking for Mark Scribner. Where is he?" "Yeah, he's in biology class, but we'll get him out for you."
Yeah.
Now I don't know
what
what
this thing called the internet, so you could push it out there.
So if Shakespeare was alive, I think he'd write a book on the Patriots. Tell us, how do you, when you look at Belichick and Kraft and Brady, where do you assign credit, and what are some things that you saw that maybe people don't fully appreciate?
I talked to a guy, Jeff Benedict, who wrote a book, The Dynasty, and he had a pretty good line. He said he looked at, and I asked him about this, is it Belichick or is it Brady? And he drew a similarity to John Lennon and Paul McCartney. He said, they're pretty good alone, but they're really, really good together. And, I think we've gone back and forth on this, last year, obviously Brady was the key to success. He left Belichick and won a Super Bowl. Now this year, you see what Belichick has done with a 7-9 team, a rookie quarterback, a bunch of guys who weren't even on the team last year, and he's made the playoffs. And who knows what they're going to do in the playoffs. So right now, I can't put my finger on who gets the credit. I will give Robert Kraft credit for his the way he has handled Bill Belichick as opposed to the way he handled Bill Parcells. He was just too hands-on. He admitted that he interfered too much with draft picks, with other matters, and that basically caused Bill Parcells to leave town. He learned his lesson. Just like Belichick learned coaching lessons in Cleveland, he became a better coach when he was here. Robert Kraft learned a lot of lessons through Bill Parcells and Pete Carroll before Bill Belichick came. So Belichick came at the right time with the right owner.
Do you have anybody in your profession that you kind of like marvel at or just admire their work in terms of, on the national stage, local?
It's got to be Tom Brady. I've never seen anything like it. And, he's as nice a guy now as he was when he was a rookie. And I'll never forget. It was a preseason game, and we were down in Carolina, I think. He came in. He was the fourth string quarterback and threw a touchdown pass. And I said, "Oh, I've interviewed Drew Bledsoe 1,000 times. He only played one series." So I went and I interviewed Brady. He says, "Why are you talking to me? I'm the fourth string quarterback." I said, "Well, you threw a touchdown pass to David Patton, and who knows, maybe you and David Patton will be throwing to each other someday." He goes, "Oh, that would be nice, but in my dreams." And sure enough, he threw enough touchdown passes to David Patton. But I think Brady, without question, is the most impressive. Right on his heels is Larry Bird. We would come in and set up for live shots in the old Garden at probably about 4:00, and Larry would be there every single game. And you have a guy who was one of my interns, Joe Catato. He was a ball boy for the Celtics, and Larry just shot like 100 shots. He went all the way around the arc, and then he ran laps around the Garden. The old Garden, you could between the loads and the promenade seats, you could actually walk around. So he'd run laps there, and then it'd be like 5:30 or so, and I see the rookies walking in with their bags over their shoulders, chuckling. And I said, if this guy is a 3-time MVP and he's here at 4:00 shooting and running laps, where the hell are you? Maybe it might be not a bad idea for you to get in here and shoot some shots.
So you noticed the work ethic, and that was
without him, But I think you look with him, Bird, and Marvin Hagler, the boxer, one of my all-time favorites. Yeah. Trained in a gymnasium above a hardware store in downtown Brockton. Never forgot his roots. He had two. Goody and Pat Petronelli, they were his trainers in the gym. When he went along a lot of fame and fortune, there were a lot of big, fancy guys with a lot of jewelry that wanted to manage him. Nope, these guys, when I was making $50, for a Golden Gloves thing, these guys were with me, and I'm going to be with them now. When he signed up for his fight for Sugar Ray Leonard, I'll never forget this. He was living up in Attitash in New Hampshire, and Goody and Pat Petronelli went up to see him, and they said, "We got a big payday. Sugar Ray wants to fight us." I don't know what it was. Let's say that he was going to get 21 million, because I'm picking a number I can divide by 3. And so they said, "Don't worry, Marvin, we'll take a lesser cut. You're the one, you're the big," he says. And Marvin went into a tantrum. He says, "We are having the same deal we've had all along. If it's 21 million, 7 for you, Goody, 7 for you, Pat, 7 for me. If it's 30 million, it's 10 for each of us. Otherwise, there's no fight." And how many guys would say something like that? And but he never. It would seem we go to Las Vegas, and this is really right out of Rocky. Apollo Creed would be training in the lobby of this grand hotel. Marvin Hagler would go to a place called Johnny Taco's Gym, where you had to walk through a bar and duck your head and go out into this back room. And the only thing was missing was the little chickens that they had in Rocky. We had to run around and chase. And Marvin's got like tube socks on. One of them has like blue and red stripes. The other one's got like green and yellow stripes. And you had to love the guy, because he just represented all of us here in New England, all the blue collar, hardworking people.
So you've been covering sports for over 40 years. You've been a fan for more. Maybe step back and kind of paint a picture of where you think the Celtics have come from. What were some of the highs and lows, where they are now, and what the potential is for the future?
Well, I grew up with the Russell Cousy era. I lived through that. I was born in 53. So in 69, when they won their 11th, I was 16 years old. They were the greatest team and my favorite team of all time. Red Auerbach just had a knack for rebuilding. Russell left, Sam Jones left. He rebuilt the team. He got Dave Cowens. He got Charlie Scott. He got JoJo White. He got Don Chaney. They win in 74. They win in 76. Then he makes a brilliant move, and he drafts Larry Bird with who had a year left to play at the Indiana State. And he's the property of the Celtics. And, of course, he goes on and plays in the national championship against Magic Johnson. Then he becomes a pro and wins the title in his second year. He makes a great deal with the Golden State to get Robert Parrish and a draft pick, which they used to take Kevin McHale. So that was another era right there. When that era ended, I don't know if it was because there are more teams in the league. Free agents didn't want to play in cold weather, and they were signing with teams like Phoenix and Los Angeles, the Clippers, or the Lakers. But the Celtics had a hard time getting talent. They got Paul Pierce in the loop, but they had Antoine Walker with them. They just didn't have the right chemistry and the right blend. They had problems with some of the coaches. I felt bad for Chris Ford. I thought he deserved a little bit better. And I think when Patino came in, it was a disaster. And then ML Carr came in, it was a disaster. But Danny Ainge came in, and it was almost like having a young Red Auerbach again. He made the deal with the Timberwolves to get Kevin Garnett made the deal to get Ray Allen to complement Paul Pierce, and then went and got a lot of blue collar guys who really didn't care how many the word is touches. I didn't get enough touches, and guys who would do some of the dirty work. We got the big baby on the team, and they won a title, and they should have won a title in 2010 when they lost in 7 games if Kendrick Perkins didn't get hurt. Nowadays, I have trouble watching the Celtics, because to me they just look like what some of the other team, the losers, like the LA Clippers, always look like to me. A bunch of selfish players. They're only interested in their stats and their numbers. Guys that would put me before we. And with the Celtics, it was always we before me. So I'm not encouraged about the Celtics right now. I thought when maybe they got Kyrie Irving that he would help them. That was a disaster. I thought Gordon Hayward was a great pick. He's gone right now. So why are people leaving the Celtics? Horford left, he came back. But why are people leaving? This should be a destination. This shouldn't be a jumping off point.
Yeah, and the sport's changed a lot, I think, too. I mean, it seems like, the way it's the 3-pointers and, like you said, the stats and it's all. I used to love the old school style of basketball and the play calling and running defense and the rivalries too. There doesn't seem to be because players are so transitional. They're going for the big mega contracts and they're just flipping around, and that those rivalries. I think the sport as a whole, I don't know what their viewership is now, but it's just not the same stuff that we grew up watching. That I think is a good product per se.
Incredibly, it's the number 2 most popular sport in the world behind soccer.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I learned that on Bloomberg Business of Sports. We talked to somebody from London one day, but I find it. And I hate to say this, my dad was my high school basketball coach at Swampscott. I find it unwatchable. It's an unwatchable product. And when I was still doing the nightly sportscasts, I wouldn't pick my pen and paper up and log down the shots I was going to use until the final 5 minutes, because that's really what the game came down to. If somebody was up by 22 in the early third quarter, I said it's going to be a 2-point game, and sure enough, it is. But the difference between it became in the NFL. You market teams. You market the Cowboys. You market the Patriots. You market the Buccaneers. In basketball, they market individuals. It was Jordan. Then it was Kobe. Now it's LeBron. Now it's Steph Curry. It isn't the Warriors. It's Steph Curry. Well, Steph Curry goes against Dirk Nowitzki. Kobe Bryant goes against Shaquille O'Neal, and that's a big difference. From the times when the Celtics were great teams. I mean, when you had the big 3 of Allen, Garnett, and Paul Pierce, it was the big 3. It wasn't, some people couldn't even know their names. They said, well, are the big 3 all healthy tonight? Yep, they're all healthy tonight. And
Mike, it's the 50th anniversary of Title IX this June. My guess is if you look back at your career, probably 90% of your coverage is of male sports. Is that going to change? Is there going to ever be gender parity? Now that you're doing Bloomberg, you're looking at the economics. I do think a lot of households, women are doing the buying. Women's tennis, I think, is, people watch that, and I think in some cases more than men's tennis. I'm just wondering where you think that may be heading.
Well, the NCAA March Madness this year is going to it's branding both the men's and the women's for the first time. I think last year it opened up a lot of eyes when the women's tournament was in San Antonio and the men's tournament was in Indianapolis, and they showed that they played at a bubble, and they showed where the men were staying in the hotels, the big banquet halls where they had their food, the gigantic fieldhouse sized weight room they had. And there was a woman that played for Oregon. I can't remember her name, but she certainly was a voice that affected change. And they showed they had these little, like something you get at a corner deli, like a little cardboard thing with like a little salad in it with a plastic fork and a juice bottle. And their weight room consisted of about 5 dumbbells. Mm-hmm. And so now they're going to give the same amount of money to the tournament. Now, in terms of broadcasting, women's basketball and women's sports. It's all about eyeballs, and eyeballs translate into advertising dollars. And when they get the eyeballs on there, obviously women's college basketball has just accelerated in the last 40 years. And it's a great product to watch. And they sell out wherever they go. They want to play in the same venue as the men, but I think it's kind of cool to have them, have an entire weekend of women's basketball in San Antonio while we have a weekend of men's basketball in Indianapolis, rather than dovetailing them like Friday, Sunday for the women's and Saturday, Monday for the men. But it all comes down to eyeballs. We talked about this on Bloomberg, we've had a lot of women on that played in the WNBA, and, when they had, 2,000 people in the seats, and they're calling for, parity and pay. And, the pay stub comes from the television contracts. I mean, it's a direct line. That's where you make the connection there. That's why the NBA players are making so much money, because people are watching the product. Even though I thought it's unwatchable, they are watching.
Mike, one of the things we do, we get to talk to people like yourself, really successful people. What do you personally think made you successful in your career? Is there multiple things, or I know I'm pumping sunshine up your ass, but you're always, to me, you were the top lead dog in the city for your whole career. But what made you, in your opinion, really good at what you were doing?
I think I had to start with my parents, who instilled some core values that I still practice today. Be on time, be accountable, don't be afraid to say you're sorry or you were wrong, and keep your mouth shut and your eyes and your ears open. And I did that a lot. I didn't know what I was doing. The first night I walked into a TV station was March 25th, 1982. Because Channel 5 had Don Gillis had a lot of vacation. They were looking for a fill-in guy. And so I sat on the side and watched Chet, Nat, Dickie, and Brian Leary did the sports. And afterwards at 7, the news went 6 to 7 in those days. They gave me Leary's script, and they said, all right, sit in the chair. The control room's going to stay for another 10 minutes, and we're going to do an audition tape for you. So I sat there and I went like this, because it was preseason baseball. The Red Sox played the Detroit Tigers in Lakeland, Florida today. They won 6-5. Now here are the highlights. My head went right down to the thing. It was about, I watched it afterwards and I said, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. So we went up to Jim Thistle's office. Jim's grew up in Everett.
Yeah,
legendary news.
I know his daughter, Liz Thistle. Yeah.
Yeah. A legendary news director. And so he says, what'd you think? And I said, well, thanks for the opportunity, but I'd have to be here every day, 8 hours a day for a minimum of 6 months to really feel comfortable. He goes, well, you don't really have that long. You've got about 24 hours. You're on tomorrow night at 6, just like that, just like that. And so I filled in, and, I was horrible. I mean, horrible. And I still have the script for my first night. It was on an old typewriter. It had 5 carbon copies. And so, as I went along, I watched. What I did was, it's just no different than sports. We tape every newscast every night. We call it the air check. And as soon as the news was over, I would grab it and I'd put it in the machine, and I'd sit down there with a notebook. And I said, oh, you can't say car and quarterback and flanker and yard anymore. You got to get rid of that Boston accent. And then I would say, oh my God, smile, look like you're happy. Don't look like you're sitting in a dentist chair. And then I said, blah, 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 blah. So when I, got those basics sort of, on their way, I said, okay, I think I got a pretty good personality. Let me sort of inject a little bit of some humor, maybe some sarcasm. And then, let's mix in a little motivational stuff. And so I gained confidence as I went along, but I think I coached myself. I wasn't afraid to ask for help. And I always had watched great broadcasters growing up, like Kurt Gowdy and Bob Costas and Chris Schenkel. And, I don't want to say I stole any ideas from them, but I think I borrowed some of their, maybe mannerisms to give myself a little bit of a comfort level. And then after a while, I didn't use a script anymore. I would put the lead in the teleprompter because the directors were always saying to themselves, all right, when do we roll the tape? When do we roll the tape? What's the roll call? What's the roll call cue? And I said, keep me on camera for 10 seconds and just roll the tape. I'll catch up. And so, I did that. And then, I got more and more comfortable as the years went on. And I really liked it. Every night, I was in the same place. If I was in the building, I tried to be out of the building as much as I could. Try to be at the Garden, Fenway, Foxborough and be on the road with all the teams in the playoffs. And I had a great comfort level there, and I just try to do something. We're all covering the Patriots playoff game. How can I make my report different from Lobel's and John Dennis's? So we try to think up something different every night. Okay, all of a sudden, whoa, I walk in, there's Vince Wilfork's mother. I said, "Can I interview you for a second?" I said, "Sure, it's okay." "All right, you must be really proud of your son, blah, blah, blah." "All right, what does he really eat for breakfast?" And the kid, "He eats 12 pancakes every time he comes in." So, we added something different that maybe the other stations didn't have. It's the competition. Lobel and I went head to head every single night, and we're great friends now. We do a podcast together. Yeah. But competition, I think, helped, as it does in any team or any business.
Yeah.
Quick questions.
Good.
Mark, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, well, I belong to Granite Links. I see Bobby Lobel all the time. He's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Watching him pull off his golf shots, and I was just curious. Again, I'm just a viewer, but it seemed like your posse that you had at Channel 5, there was a chemistry that you guys. It was almost like it could be fake. I have no idea, but it seemed like the likability that you. Chet, Natalie, I forget who the weather guy was, but
Dick Albert.
Dick Albert was amazing. I saw you put something on LinkedIn about him a couple weeks ago. But how important is that, like a really important formula to have that team connection, because you are feeding off of each other pretty much every night?
I mean, three of the four people you just mentioned are the Mount Rushmore of Boston sports, Boston television news. Chet Curtis, Natalie Jacobson, and Dick Albert. I was the insignificant right fielder that, sort of was just on the team. But I'll never forget my first day when I was in there. Natalie Jacobson walked over to me and she said, "Hi, Mike, I'm Natalie Jacobson. Welcome to Channel 5. We're thrilled to have you. You're going to do great here." And I went, "Holy crap. This is the most famous person in Boston television coming over to me, who's wiping, stains off his pants, and it tells me that I'm going to be welcome to Channel 5. And I've never forgotten that. And every time we had a new hire, we get an email that comes out and says, "Okay, we just hired John Warner as a new street reporter. Please welcome him." And I always, if I couldn't find him in person, I would send him an email, because I remember how it made me feel when Natalie did that for me. And who does that all the time? Tom Brady does it when new players come to the team. He'll be in the cafeteria and he'll go over and sit down with some rookie that just got drafted maybe in the 7th round. The kid might be cut pretty soon, or somebody they sign as a free agent they pick up in the season. And I think that's a great lesson. And there were no egos there in a business that's just overflowing with enormous egos. We had none on that desk, and these were the most recognizable people in the city of Boston: Chet, Nat, Dickie. And over at Channel 4, you had Jack Williams and Liz Walker and Lobel. And, I knew them pretty well as well. And I think that's the big thing, because we were sort of like the Celtics were. How can we be better? How can we win the ratings every night? It's always how we. It's not like, we did have a news anchor there one time who's no longer alive, but his wife used to sit home with a stopwatch. And she would clock how long Natalie was on camera and how long her husband was on camera. And, he'd come back the next day and said, "Natalie was on camera for 14 minutes and 30 seconds. I was only on camera for 11 minutes and 47 seconds. And he didn't last very long there. So I think that was key to the success.
I'm going to throw you 3 questions. Don't feel like you need to go into much detail, but just your gut reaction. John Fish led a great campaign. Boston, snagged the Olympic bid for the U.S., but then the people of Boston said no, and we didn't make it to the next round. In retrospect, do you think that was good or bad? That's one question. Second question: lacrosse, will that ever be mainstream? And then last question: Simone Biles, got a lot of attention at the Summer Olympics, mental health related stuff. Just curious on your vantage point, seeing sports over the years. What do you make of that?
For the Olympics, love John Fish. I love the initiative. I think it was the right move that the Olympics are not coming here. If you look at any cities that have had the Olympics in recent time, they're left with a lot of venues that are never used. There's a lot of money that's lost. It's an enormous investment financially for a city and any Olympic committee. And I think it would have been a traffic nightmare in Boston. Lacrosse, I see it as a great unbelievable participant sport, but still it's going to take a long time for it to be a great spectator sport. Very parallel in this country to soccer. Soccer is ahead of, in terms of spectator sports, soccer is ahead of lacrosse, but I think it's going to take a long, long time. And then Simone Biles with the mental health issue. It's real. It's happening. Athletes are being heard, and I think it's something that at every single level, from high school, college, and professional. I think it probably needs somebody on every single staff to deal with mental health of some of these athletes. No question about it.
We're almost to wrap. I've got a couple more myself. I could go on and on, just being a huge fan of yours, and obviously a sports fan. But you had to cover all these sports. Were there any like events or sports you just like you had a pit in your stomach? Like, sometimes I hear I'm friends with Chris Collins, who's another sportscaster. Yeah. He was a baseball player, but I asked him this question. I said, what sport was the most difficult? And he's like, baseball. He's like, the baseball, for whatever reason, athletes were very difficult to interview. But was there any sports that you just be like, oh, it sounds like basketball was, you're a really interesting one in football, but when you had to go out and cover something, whether it be the personalities or whatever, did you just be like, I just don't want to do it?
I love them all. I played hockey, even though I played basketball in high school. I played hockey every day after school because they flooded the playground in Swampscott where I lived. So I loved hockey. Hockey players are the easiest and the nicest, most congenial to interview. I played baseball in college, in addition to football. They're the most difficult to interview. In 1986, the American League Championship Series between the Red Sox and the Angels was on Channel 5. And that means that I had to do a live shot in the locker room after the game. So they're out in Anaheim. They're losing 3-1. And they lost the night before. I was in the locker room, and it was like, it was like a funeral parlor. And you could just hear people, and I'm doing the sports, and I'm like whispering, and I got to interview Roger Clemens, and he says, don't worry, we got Lefty going tomorrow, meaning Bruce Hurst. So now, about the night that they're losing 5-3, I get down by the clubhouse, by the locker room. I'm going, oh, I don't want to do this. This is it. The Angels are going to win, and the Red Sox are going to get eliminated, and nobody's going to want to talk to me, and they're going to look at me like, get out of here and get lost. All of a sudden, Dave Henderson hits the home run, and to give the Red Sox the win. And I'm going, yes. And I go in the locker room. Everybody's happy. Everybody wants to talk to me. And they came back. They won Game 6 and Game 7 in Boston. And then now we go to New York, and we're at game number 6. The ball went through Buckner's legs. I never saw it because in the top of the 10th inning, the Red Sox went up 5-3. Henderson hit another home run. So I get down to the bowels of Shea Stadium, concrete walls, cinder blocks, no televisions, no cell phones, nothing. Red Sox are winning 5-3. It's just great that they're going to end the 68-year jinx, and they're going to win the World Series. We're breaking into Nightline with Ted Koppel, which you never did. And so I'm standing there. The Red Sox clubhouse door opens. Out comes Mrs. Yockey. They're hurrying her down the hall. Out comes Bob Costas pulling his earpiece out. He goes down the hall. Then they wheel out the World Series trophy. That goes down the hall. And my cameraman and I going, oh, maybe they're moving to a bigger room. It's going to be such a big celebration. Then they wheel out about 20 cases of champagne. And I'm saying, holy crap, we better get down the hall. Just then, a New York City police officer has a transistor radio. He goes, the ball went through Buckner's legs. The ball went through Buckner's legs. We won the freaking game. I said, what did you just say? He says, yeah, the Mets just won. I said, how'd they win? It was 5-3 with two outs when I came down here. And then we hear these cleats clutch. There was a little walkway from the dugout to the locker room, and you see a couple gloves get fired against the wall and a couple of curse words. And then that was not a fun locker room to go into and talk to afterwards, especially poor Bill Buckner.
All right. I got 3 quick questions.
Right.
NFTs in sports, advice to parents of high school athletes, and how did you make history at your college/university in that big football game?
NFTs are
non-fungible tokens where
I know what they are. I mean, literally you could just have like a video of Larry Bird hitting a jump shot against the Portland Trailblazers, and that's an NFT, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So and like, why do I own it over somebody else if we both have the same video? That's I read it, I research it, and I still have 1,000 questions every time I go after them. But they're real and they're here to stay. Parents of high school athletes right now, don't specialize in one sport. Please, please, please play 2 sports, play 3 sports. You know, just it's even if you're a starter on the soccer team and you might sit on the bench on the basketball team, that doesn't mean that you're not doing something constructive and competitive every single day. You're at practice, you're accountable, you learn about reliability, you learn about teamwork. I think your grades will be better. There are so many great athletes. Mike Eruzione, who scored the winning goal in the 1980 Olympic hockey game. I played football against him in high school, at Winthrop High School. I played basketball where he played hockey. We played baseball against each other. He actually threw a no-hitter against Swampscott. He's a big advocate of playing. Tommy Glavins, 2-time Cy Young winner from the Atlanta Braves, pitched for Billerica High School. His senior year, he got awarded the John Carlton Award, which went to the most outstanding high school hockey player. He was a goalie for Billerica High School. And he said, I never would have been as good in baseball if I didn't play multiple sports. So that would be my advice for that. And history at Harvard, I could say I graduated. That might have been an historic moment when I finally walked out of Harvard Yard. But I was fortunate enough to be on a great team in 1975. Harvard had never won the Ivy League title outright. They'd shared it a number of times. And I happened to be put in a great position. There were 70,000 people in the Yale Bowl. It was the 100th year of Harvard-Yale football. It was 1975. And I kicked a field goal with 33 seconds to go to beat Yale 10-7. But I say we did it because they did all the work. I just ran off the bench. I was a backup quarterback and also the field goal kicker, which was not unusual in those days. You know, the punters and the field goal kickers usually played another position. But other than graduating, that probably was, an historic moment.
Yeah, and you said it was a 26-yard field goal, and you did it 26.25 inches. It just barely...
If I could hit my pitching wedge like I hit that field goal, my handicap will drop about 5 shots.
So we're about to close up, but I still have just a couple more. Can you pick one of your favorite interview of your entire career at this point? And I know your career is not over, so this is not a memorial by any means.
I loved interviewing Bill Parcells. I thought every time I'd come in, he'd look at me and I'd have khaki pants on and I have loafers with no socks and a button-down shirt. He says, "Where the heck did you grow up? Greenwich, Connecticut? Jesus, look at you. You're like a little preppy." I said, "What's wrong with this outfit?" I said, "Want me dressed like you, like a hitman from New Jersey?" You know? He said, "Yeah." He said, "You need a black mock turtleneck, a nice gray sharkskin jacket, and some black slacks and some tiny loafers." But he was good because he'd always keep you on your toes, and he was funny. And Belichick to me is still always a great interview. I got along with him really well, and still had understood the X's and O's of football, so that helped a great bit. But there's a lot of great ones, but having done a show with those 2 guys, was really special. And I was a lucky guy to sit down with them for 4 years with Parcells, and I don't know how many years I did with Belichick, probably like 12.
Yeah. And for someone, it's a different world now with social media and all that, but for someone getting into your business, what are some of the things that they should know? I think you referenced, the way that you were brought up was the showing up on time, the loyalty, the accountability stuff. But for the 20-year-old Mike Lynch self, what would you give some advice for some new up and coming people?
The big V words: versatile. If you're versatile, you're valuable. I would learn how to anchor, learn how to report, learn how to write, learn how to produce. You may have to learn how to shoot the camera. Be good at this stuff. Just be on top of Twitter. Be on top of all the social media stuff. This is where the news comes from now. Learn how to do these things. Learn how to build graphics. Like a great clever one like the shrimp tank behind you guys right there. I think versatility is the key to will open the eyes of anybody that's hiring. The hiring is usually done by a news director. Forget about trying to imitate everybody, and don't come up. Forget about trying to get a shtick. Lighting your necktie on fire, or every time somebody gets a hat trick or something like that. Just be solid and be versatile. That would be my best advice.
And authentic too. But I was just curious, the passing of John Madden. I was going to wonder if you ever tried to incorporate like a BAM or a POW in your repertoire. But But wouldn't you think being authentic is pretty valuable?
Yeah, and I think if you're a phony, if you're artificial, I think it shows up with the viewers figure it out pretty fast. They could tell this guy's a phony, this guy's for real. So be yourself and be your best self. But I saw that this is another one for the high school parents. Read. And when you're sick of reading, read some more. Because baseball teams play 162 games. If they win 81 and lose 81, you have to do 81 different ways of saying the Atlanta Braves lost tonight. The Atlanta Braves succumbed to the Houston Astros tonight. The Atlanta Braves fell shy. You can't just say they lost tonight. They were beaten. They got hammered. You got to come up with you've got to have a thesaurus inside your head. Now it's easy because the thesaurus is a click away. I used to always have one on my desk right next to me. So, a good reader is a good writer, and a good writer is a good communicator. So whether you're going to go into print or electronic media, read, get a great vocabulary, and be a good writer.
So with that said, Mike, thanks so much for your valuable time. It's a huge privilege for me being a big fan, and your information about your Bloomberg podcast. Can you just mention again, that's 3 times a week now? That information will be in the body.
3 times. We're on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You can go to wherever you get your podcast. Look for the Bloomberg Business of Sports. The logo, I think, has a big tennis ball on it, and it says it's yellow and black. And Bloomberg Business of Sports. I'm happy that they're including me, and I'm really thrilled to talk to you and John today. It's a real honor to be on this show, and thank you. Hope I didn't babble too much.
No, it was amazing. Thanks again, Mike. We appreciate it.
All right, Mark, John, thank you very much.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.